Welcome to Sleepy Journeys, the podcast designed to lull you into a peaceful slumber with soothing stories through time, places, and ideas. Whether you're winding down after a long day or simply looking for a peaceful escape, you're in the right place. My name's Jack, and I'm so happy to have you here with me. Each night on Sleepy Journeys, we set off together on gentle adventures designed to soothe your mind and ease you into rest. You'll find journeys through history, comforting fairy tales, myths and folklore, the wonders of science, fascinating inventions, inspiring famous figures, music history, and even calm explorations around the world. No matter where your curiosity takes you, there's a dreamy Sleepy Journeys show for you. Tonight, we're going to embark on a gentle journey through the secrets of Alcatraz. So before you get comfortable, as always, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching or listening from and what time it is for you. Now, take a deep breath and let's begin. Imagine yourself floating softly on the calm waters of San Francisco Bay. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft amber glow along the sky's edge. The waters are quiet, lapping gently at the hull of a small, silent boat. You drift closer and closer toward a small island rising from the mist, rocky, rugged, and crowned with the shadowed silhouette of a weathered prison. This is Alcatraz, known to many as the Rock. But tonight, we don't approach it with the harsh light of day or the weight of its infamous past. Instead, we drift softly, letting the sea breeze carry us. We let the fog wrap around us like a comforting blanket. The island feels more like a whisper, a memory held gently above the waves, rather than a place of bars and stone. The moon peeks through thin clouds, casting a silver path across the water. Seabirds circle high overhead, their cries muted by distance and nightfall. The old walls of Alcatraz rise up, not threatening, but quietly standing as they have for over a century, worn by salt, wind, and time. You sense the stories they hold, layered deep in their bones. Stories of soldiers and prisoners, of escape attempts and solitary walks, of echoes in long corridors, and even of nature's slow return. Tonight, we'll move softly through those stories. We won't rush or force the details. We'll simply let them unfold like a slow tide. We'll explore the origins of the island, long before it became the most famous prison in America. We'll step gently into the daily lives once held inside its walls, not to dwell on punishment, but to notice the small, human details. We'll brush past the legends of escape, not for the thrill, but for the quiet persistence of hope. And we'll wander softly through the years after the prison closed, when the island became a place of memory and gentle decay, where the seabirds reclaimed the stone. Take a deep, slow breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let your eyes rest. You're safe here, floating in this quiet space between land and sea, between past and present. As we begin this journey, imagine the sound of the foghorn in the distance, its low, steady note blending with the soft splash of waves. Imagine the cool scent of salt in the air, the hush of nightfall, and the timeless feeling of drifting toward a place where stories linger in every stone. Alcatraz holds many secrets, but tonight we won't rush to uncover them. Instead, we will listen, softly, slowly, to the murmurs of history, the sigh of the sea, and the gentle unfolding of time. Let the worries of the day slip away. Let your mind quiet, your breath slow, and your body grow still. Long before the name Alcatraz echoed through the newspapers, long before prison walls rose from the rocky shore, the island sat quietly in the waters of San Francisco Bay. It was a place shaped slowly, patiently, by the tides, the winds, and the seabirds that circled above. Picture the island as it once was, a rugged outcrop of rock, battered by waves, where seabirds nested and marine life flourished in the surrounding waters. The Ohlone people, the native inhabitants of the Bay Area, knew this island well. To them, it was a part of the great natural rhythm that shaped their world. While no evidence suggests they lived permanently on Alcatraz, they likely visited its shores, perhaps to gather bird eggs or to use the site in cultural practices. The island was a fixed point in their understanding of the land and sea, a landmark standing quiet and solitary beyond the shifting tides. Centuries passed, and the quiet of the island remained, broken only by the cries of gulls and the whispering wind. In 1775, the Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Ayala sailed into San Francisco Bay and charted the island. He named it La Isla de los Alcatraces, the island of the pelicans, for the abundant seabirds he observed. Over time, the name would soften into Alcatraz, but the birds would always remain, faithful tenants of the rocky cliffs and craggy shoreline. Imagine standing on the shore, watching the fog drift across the water. Picture the small, rocky island silhouetted in the mist, a place that seems both near and far, both familiar and remote. It would remain that way for decades, a quiet century in the bay, until the 19th century brought change. As California became part of the United States and the gold rush drew settlers and fortune seekers to the west, Alcatraz's isolated position took on a new meaning. The U.S. military saw in the island not just a rocky outcrop, but a strategic stronghold. Its location near the mouth of the bay made it an ideal place to guard against naval threats. By the mid-1800s, Alcatraz was designated as a military reservation. Fortifications began to rise, cannons positioned, barracks constructed, and the once wild island began its slow transformation into a fortress. The lighthouses were among the first signs of human presence, casting their beams into the foggy nights, guiding ships safely into the bay. The lonely island was no longer just for the birds. It had become part of the expanding network of human defense and settlement. Picture those early days. Soldiers standing watch beneath a gray sky, cannons aimed out at the cold, restless sea, and seabirds wheeling overhead, undisturbed by the shifting human purpose below. Alcatraz had entered a new chapter, but it remained, in its heart, a place shaped by nature, its rocky bones weathered by centuries of wind and salt. This origin story, from natural haven to military outpost, sets the stage for all that would follow. But even as we move through the layers of history, let's carry with us the image of the island before walls and cells, before escapes and legends, just a quiet rock in a vast, fog-wrapped sea holding the patience of ages. Let's drift further back into the delicate realm of memory and early encounter. The Olone, who lived along the shores and hills of what we now call the San Francisco Bay Area, had a relationship with the land and sea that was deeply intimate. Their world was one of rhythm, the movement of tides, the patterns of seasons, the migrations of animals. To them, Alcatraz was not a destination, but part of the surrounding environment, an island noted, visited perhaps, but left largely to its birds and stones. Imagine their canoes gliding softly across the bay's surface, the rhythmic dip of paddles, the soft slap of water. They may have approached the island carefully, gathering seabird eggs or watching the restless waves. The island stood silent, a rocky guardian off the shore. When European explorers arrived, they brought new names and new maps. In the late 1700s, Spanish explorers sailing into the bay noted the islands scattered across the waters. Juan Manuel de Ayala's 1775 voyage marked Alcatraz officially on European charts. La Isla de los Alcatrazes, the island of the pelicans, spoke to what they saw, a nesting ground teeming with seabirds, wild and untouched. The island's role began to shift subtly at this point, no longer just a point in the indigenous landscape, but now a landmark for incoming ships, a note on maps, a reference for sailors. Yet even then, the island remained largely undisturbed, a lonely, wind-scoured place in the midst of the growing bustle on the mainland. For decades after European arrival, Alcatraz lay mostly untouched, its cliffs and outcroppings home to the same seabirds and seals, its rocky edges washed by the same tides. But change was coming, slow but certain. Human eyes were turning toward the island, seeing not just a quiet rock, but a place of potential purpose. As the 19th century unfolded, California shifted from Spanish rule to Mexican governance, and then into American hands. With the discovery of gold in 1848, San Francisco transformed almost overnight from a sleepy coastal settlement into a bustling port of wealth and ambition. The United States government recognized the strategic importance of San Francisco Bay, and Alcatraz, isolated, rugged, and close to the mouth of the bay, quickly drew military interest. In the 1850s, the U.S. Scouts Army set plans in motion to fortify the island as part of a defensive triangle with Fort Point and Angel Island, designed to protect the valuable bay from naval threats. Picture soldiers hauling cannons up steep rocky slopes, engineers marking out defensive positions, and the first lighthouses casting steady beams across the shifting waters. Alcatraz became a place of purpose and preparation, its natural isolation transformed into a military asset. Barracks were built, fortifications constructed, and soon the island bristled with weapons and soldiers, watching over the quiet bay. As the decades passed, Alcatraz's role expanded from defensive fortress to military prison. By the late 1800s, the island began housing soldiers convicted of crimes, and the slow transition toward its most famous chapter as a federal penitentiary had begun. Yet even then, nature remained. The fog still rolled across the island. The seabirds still nested among the rocks. The waves still lapped at the shores. Alcatraz's military years were a period of transformation, but not erasure. The rugged spirit of the island endured, a reminder that, even when shaped by human hands, a place retains echoes of its older, wilder past. As the years moved forward, Alcatraz shed its military skin and slowly took on its most infamous role, that of a federal penitentiary. By the 1930s, the island had been reshaped again, this time into a maximum security prison meant to house the nation's most notorious and incorrigible criminals. But let's set aside the sharp edges of headlines and criminal records. Tonight, we drift gently into the daily life inside the walls, past the bars and stone, into the quieter corners of routine and existence. Picture the island surrounded by a cold sea, wrapped in fog, its interior humming with the subtle rhythms of human life, footsteps echoing down long hallways, the distant clang of a metal door, the murmur of voices behind thick, concrete walls. Alcatraz was designed to break escape attempts, to break the spirit of rebellion, but it could not break the slow passage of time. For the men who lived inside, days stretched out in a predictable, almost meditative pattern. Wake, work, eat, sleep, a cycle repeated endlessly, marked by the ringing of bells, the shuffling of feet, and the occasional glance of sky through barred windows. Inside the cell blocks, hundreds of narrow cells lined up side by side, each a tiny world unto itself. Bare, cold, simple, the cells measured just 5 feet by 9 feet, with a small cot, a sink, and a toilet. Imagine standing inside, feeling the cool air against your skin, hearing the soft drip of a distant faucet, noticing the pale light slipping through the bars. These spaces, though small, held entire lives, quiet thoughts, memories, regrets, small acts of defiance, and slow moments of acceptance. Prisoners on Alcatraz followed strict routines. Days began early, with counts and inspections. Meals were taken in the dining hall, where rules governed everything from seating to speaking. Work occupied much of the day, in the laundry rooms, the workshops, the gardens. There were moments of leisure too, books from the prison library, time in the exercise yard, the rare privilege of music. Imagine a prisoner strumming a soft tune on a banjo in the evening light, his notes drifting out across the cold sea. And beyond the prisoners, there was another layer of life unfolding, the world of the guards and their families who made their home on the island, quietly living alongside the penitentiary's stark routines. Within the walls, the prisoners lived lives both constrained and surprisingly full. Each inmate carried their own history, their own shadows, but within Alcatraz, they were stripped down to number, uniform, and routine. Yet even here, in this narrow framework, human spirit flickered softly. Imagine waking up in a small cell, the thin mattress beneath you, the dim morning light filtering in. You hear the faint sounds of stirring along the row, the clink of a cup, the shuffle of feet. A bell sounds, and the day begins. Count, breakfast, work assignment, the flow is measured, controlled, but within that flow, small moments stretch out, moments where thought drifts beyond the walls. Some prisoners found escape in reading, losing themselves in books from the prison library. Others found solace in work, shaping gloves in the industrial shops or tending to the island's sparse gardens. Music offered a rare gift. The prison band, formed by inmates, sometimes lifted soft melodies through the cold halls. Even notorious figures like Al Capone found brief refuge in music, his banjo providing a gentle thread of sound against the stillness. The exercise yard offered fresh air, but even there, freedom was an illusion. High walls, sharp fences, and the ever-present sea served as reminders that this was an island built on containment. Yet in the quiet moments, under the sky, a man could feel the sun on his face, the wind in his hair, and, for a few heartbeats, remember the world beyond. On the other side of the prison bars, life unfolded at a slower, steadier pace. The guards, along with their families, lived in modest housing on the island. For them, Alcatraz was not just a workplace, but a home, a place where children played, meals were shared, and quiet domestic routines unfolded against the backdrop of cold stone and steel. Imagine a child riding a tricycle along a narrow path overlooking the sea, waves crashing far below. Picture families gathering for dinner, the lights of San Francisco twinkling faintly across the water. While the prisoner's world was one of confinement, the guard's world was one of quiet vigilance, always aware of the balance between duty and life. The guards walked the cell blocks with practiced calm, keys jangling softly at their belts. They knew the inmates, recognized faces, routines, moods. Their job was to maintain order, to uphold the rules, but also to witness the daily lives unfolding behind the bars. For the families, life on Alcatraz was paradoxical, safe yet surrounded by danger, isolated yet closely knit. Children attended school on the mainland, ferried back and forth across the bay. Wives managed homes, gardens, and community events. Against the stark backdrop of one of America's most feared prisons, life found its quiet, steady rhythms. When night fell, the island grew still. The prisoners settled into their cells, the guards made their rounds, and the sea wrapped the rock in a cool embrace. The lights dimmed, the fog rolled in, and the island's two worlds, inmate and guard, confinement and freedom, drifted softly into another night. As we drift deeper into Alcatraz's history, we come upon the figures whose names are most often linked to the rock, the famous inmates whose stories ripple outward through time. Yet tonight, we will not stir up the drama of their crimes or the sensational headlines that once followed them. Instead, we will walk softly through their days on the island, noticing the quiet details, the ordinary moments that shaped their time here. In the cells of Alcatraz, fame dissolved. Whether a gangster, a bank robber, or a kidnapper, each man became just another prisoner, bound by routine, enclosed by stone. For many, Alcatraz represented the end of the line, the place they were sent when no other prison could hold them, when escape attempts or violent acts had marked them as too dangerous for ordinary confinement. But even here, life settled into rhythms, and even the most notorious figures found themselves absorbed into the quiet current of daily life. We will begin with perhaps the most famous of them all, Al Capone, the legendary gangster whose name still conjures images of 1920s Chicago, prohibition, and organized crime. Yet on Alcatraz, Capone was no larger-than-life figure. He was simply prisoner number 85, another man in a gray uniform, subject to the same rules and routines as everyone else. Al Capone arrived on Alcatraz in 1934, just a few years after the prison opened. By then, his health had already begun to decline, the result of years of untreated syphilis. Gone was the powerful kingpin, replaced by a man grappling with both illness and the crushing isolation of prison life. Imagine Capone sitting in his small cell, the cool air drifting in, the faint sounds of footsteps echoing down the corridor. He was no longer the boss of Chicago, no longer commanding armies of men or controlling underground empires. Here, he scrubbed floors, worked in the laundry, and followed orders like any other inmate. One of Capone's small refuges was music. He played the banjo, and during his time on Alcatraz, he even participated in the prison band. Picture him sitting with the instrument in his hands, plucking soft notes, the sound drifting gently down the halls, perhaps bringing a moment of peace to a place heavy with silence and steel. Capone's health continued to deteriorate during his years on the island. By the time he left in 1939, he was no longer the feared and powerful figure he once was. He had become a quiet shadow of himself, his mind clouded by disease, his past reduced to a series of distant memories. In the end, Alcatraz stripped away the legend, leaving only the man. And like all the others, Capone was eventually carried away from the island, leaving his cell empty, his banjo silent, his story softened by time. Beyond Capone, Alcatraz housed a number of other infamous figures, each bringing their own histories, their own quiet battles, into the prison's stony heart. Among them was George "Machine Gun" Kelly, once a feared bank robber and kidnapper, known for his rapid-fire weapon and bold exploits. But inside Alcatraz, Kelly was simply prisoner number 117. Stripped of his gangster persona, he became known for his mild manner, earning the nickname Pop Gun Kelly among guards and inmates. Imagine him walking slowly through the yard, keeping to himself, no longer the bold outlaw, but just another man trying to pass the time. Then there was Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman of Alcatraz. Despite the nickname, Stroud never kept birds on the rock. His famous bird studies took place during his earlier years in Leavenworth. On Alcatraz, he was kept mostly in isolation, his reputation as a dangerous and difficult prisoner preceding him. Picture him in his small cell, his sharp mind turning over thoughts and ideas, his hours filled with reading and writing, rather than the care of feathered creatures. Beyond the headline names, Alcatraz held many other men whose stories, though less well known, weave quietly into the island's history. Each prisoner brought with him not just a criminal record, but a lifetime of moments, choices, and memories. And within the walls, those stories softened, becoming something quieter, more reflective. One such figure was Arthur "Doc" Barker, a member of the infamous Barker Carpus gang. While his name once struck fear during the violent days of Depression-era bank robberies, on Alcatraz, he became simply another man behind bars, subject to the same endless routine. Barker's time on the island ended in tragedy. He was shot and killed during an escape attempt in 1939, his desperate flight across the darkened yard cut short by gunfire. But beneath that grim end lies the quieter truth. Years spent walking the same concrete paths, years of conversations, silences, and small human moments that never made headlines. Then there was Henry Young, whose story became the subject of later films and books. While popular media painted him as a victim of harsh treatment and injustice, the reality was more layered. Young was a convicted bank robber and murderer, a complicated figure who, like so many others, passed his days on Alcatraz moving through the slow, repetitive cycles of confinement. Picture him standing at the bars of his cell, gazing out at the narrow strip of hallway, counting footsteps, waiting for the next shift, the next meal, the next small change in a world designed to stay the same. Countless others filled the cells: bank robbers, forgers, escape artists, and those whose crimes were more desperate than notorious. Each brought their own rhythms into the prison's heartbeat. Some found small escapes in books, music, or art. Others withdrew inward, folding into themselves as the years passed. Still others clung to routines, exercise, letters from home, brief glimpses of sky, as though these small anchors could tether them to life beyond the bars. Inside the dining hall, mealtime became both a point of routine and quiet tension. While strict rules kept the space orderly, the gathered presence of hundreds of hardened men made each meal an exercise in calm vigilance. Picture the long tables lined with men, heads bowed over plates, utensils clicking softly, guards standing watch nearby. Despite its reputation, violence within the dining hall was rare. The rules were clear, the consequences swift, and for most inmates, the daily rhythm mattered more than the fleeting flare of rebellion. And then there were the countless acts of small, private humanity. The prisoner who sketched delicate portraits in pencil on scraps of paper. The inmate who carefully cultivated a single potted plant outside his workshop window. The men who exchanged quiet words of comfort or warning as they passed in the yard. These were not the moments captured in headlines or reports, but they were the true texture of daily life on Alcatraz. Ordinary men in extraordinary confinement, carrying the weight of their pasts and the quiet hope or resignation of their futures. Let us carry these softer stories with us, not the sharp outlines of crime and punishment, but the muted colors of existence, the scraping of a pencil, the bending of a stem toward light, the brief meeting of eyes across a crowded yard. In these gentle details, the rock's hardest walls soften just a little, and the human heart, however confined, continues to beat. Even on an island designed to be inescapable, the human spirit has always carried a quiet, persistent longing for freedom. Throughout Alcatraz's history, there were many who dreamed, plotted, and tried to slip away from the rock, some with careful plans, others with desperate hope. Tonight, we won't follow their stories for the thrill or tension, but rather with soft curiosity, as if we are drifting through the echoes of their determination and ingenuity. Between 1934 and 1963, when Alcatraz served as a federal penitentiary, there were 14 known escape attempts involving 36 inmates. Most were quickly caught or perished in the cold, treacherous waters. Yet their stories remain, woven into the island's legend, like faint footprints on a misty shore. Perhaps the most famous of all these attempts is the one that unfolded in 1962, a story that still lingers in quiet mystery to this day. Let us step softly into the cool, dimly lit cell block, where 3 prisoners quietly chipped away at the back walls of their cells, night after night, for many months. Frank Morris, an intelligent and skilled inmate, worked alongside brothers Clarence and John Anglin, determined to find a way out of Alcatraz. Using simple tools, a spoon, a drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor, they widened the small ventilation holes at the back of their cells. Piece by piece, they removed the concrete, concealing their progress with painted cardboard and papier-mâché dummy heads crafted to fool the guards during bed checks. Imagine the patience it took, the slow, steady work carried out night after night, the quiet scraping sound hidden beneath the ambient noises of the prison. They crafted a raft and life vests from raincoats, patching them carefully with heat and glue. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they slipped through the holes they had opened, climbed up a utility corridor, and emerged onto the prison roof. They vanished into the dark waters of San Francisco Bay, leaving behind empty cells and countless unanswered questions. Despite extensive searches, no trace of them was ever definitively found. The official report concluded they had drowned in the cold, swift currents, but over the years, hints and whispers surfaced, suggesting they may have survived. Family members reported receiving unsigned postcards. A photograph surfaced decades later, and sightings were claimed in far-off places. Yet even now, the truth drifts just beyond reach, like a soft fog rolling over the water. Did they survive? Did they make it to shore, slip into new lives, and leave the rock behind forever? Or did the sea, so still and beautiful at times, claim them before dawn? We may never know, but the story lingers, adding a gentle shiver of mystery to Alcatraz's long, quiet history. While the 1962 escape remains the most famous, many others tried to flee the rock over the years. Their stories, too, weave softly into the island's legend. Some attempts were bold, others hurried and ill-prepared. In 1937, inmates Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe disappeared into the fog after slipping through prison bars and reaching the shore. Though their bodies were never recovered, authorities believed they had drowned, carried away by the icy currents. Picture the cold water swirling around them, the distant lights of the mainland barely visible through the mist. Even for the strongest swimmer, the combination of frigid temperatures and powerful tides posed almost impossible odds. Other escapees were caught before they even left the island. Guards spotted them slipping through utility corridors, climbing fences, or trying to overpower work supervisors. Each attempt was met with swift punishment and increased security, yet still, the dreams of freedom persisted. These stories were not just about escape, they were about hope, the quiet, stubborn hope that somewhere beyond the walls and the sea, another life waited. Whether they made it or not, each attempt left a small mark on the island, a ripple in its history, a whisper in its legend. As we drift through these tales tonight, we let go of the sharp edges of risk and consequence, and instead listen gently to the echoes of yearning, determination, and the timeless pull of freedom. By the early 1960s, the spirit of Alcatraz as a high-security prison had grown quiet. The once tightly controlled institution had become costly to operate and weathered by the relentless sea. Each year, the salt air gnawed a little more at the steel, wore down the concrete, and settled into the bones of the buildings. The rock, once feared and famous, was slowly coming undone, not through rebellion, but through time and tide. The last inmates left the island in 1963, but the decision to close Alcatraz began to take shape long before. Maintenance costs were soaring. The buildings, never meant to withstand decades of wind and water, were in constant need of repair. The isolation that had once made Alcatraz so effective as a prison now made it impractical and expensive. And so, the government turned its attention elsewhere. New correctional facilities, more efficient and accessible, were being built. Alcatraz, battered, costly, and decaying, was quietly retired from duty. The signs of decay were everywhere. Paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. Rust streaked the stairwells and bars. Pipes clanged with age. The salt air, relentless and invisible, crept into cracks and corners, working its quiet erosion. The prison had been costly to operate from the beginning, but by the 1950s and early 60s, those costs had become unsustainable. It cost nearly 3 times more to house a prisoner on Alcatraz than in other federal facilities. Supplies had to be ferried in. Waste had to be ferried out. Power and water were costly to maintain. Maintenance crews worked constantly to patch, shore up, and seal the prison's wounds, but it was like trying to hold back the sea itself. Every repair was temporary. The island, with its rock base and salt-laced air, resisted permanence. Picture the tired buildings standing beneath gray skies, their windows clouded with sea spray, their metal fixtures dulled and stained. Once bustling with guards, inmates, and routines, Alcatraz was growing quiet. The island no longer roared with discipline. It murmured with age. By early 1963, the federal government made the decision. Alcatraz would be closed. Its remaining inmates would be transferred. The buildings would be abandoned. The island would, for the first time in over a century, be left to breathe again without the weight of captivity. And so, on March 21, 1963, the last prisoner boarded the ferry and left the rock behind. The doors were locked, the cells stood empty, and the wind moved freely through corridors once crowded with lives. Yet even as the prison closed, Alcatraz did not disappear. The island lingered in the public imagination, not as an institution, but as a legend. People spoke of ghosts that paced the abandoned cell blocks, of cold spots and whispers in the dark. And before long, they came to see for themselves. In the years after its closure, Alcatraz began a slow transformation from fortress to historic site. The island passed into the care of the National Park Service, and its gates opened once more, not to inmates, but to visitors. Ferries carried curious tourists across the bay. They stepped onto the dock with quiet awe, their footsteps echoing where shackled feet once trod. Picture a family standing in the old dining hall, reading the rules still posted on the wall. Picture a traveler pausing in front of a solitary cell, imagining the lives that once filled it. Tourists moved softly through the halls, guided not by guards, but by recorded voices telling stories, not of punishment, but of people. Alcatraz's silence became its voice. The empty cells spoke through memory. The peeling paint told stories. The sound of the wind through broken windows whispered secrets. What had once been hidden behind thick walls was now gently shared with the world. Even the myths grew softer with time. Stories of ghostly figures and mysterious sounds drifted like fog through the corridors. Some swore they felt a presence. Others felt only the weight of history, heavy and still. Today, the footsteps that echo across Alcatraz are those of visitors. They pause, they listen, they wonder. The island has become a place not of confinement, but of reflection. The past, once locked away, now breathes freely in the salt air. As the years have passed since the closing of the prison, Alcatraz has become not just a historical site, but a living canvas of resilience. Nature, with its slow, patient hand, has painted new life across old stone, transforming a place once defined by steel and order into a sanctuary for wildness and quiet renewal. Let us linger here, just a little longer, among the plants, the birds, and the sea breeze, noticing the textures, the sounds, and the subtle magic that now fills this space. The National Park Service, together with dedicated volunteers, has played a crucial role in this restoration. Projects to conserve native plants, protect nesting bird populations, and manage delicate ecosystems continue to shape the island's modern identity. Imagine a small group of volunteers kneeling carefully in the dirt beside a crumbling wall, gently planting lupine seedlings into the rocky soil. Their hands are gloved, their movements slow and mindful, each small act of care a gesture of respect to both nature and history. Nearby, biologists track the health of western gull colonies, recording data, monitoring nests, and helping ensure that Alcatraz remains a thriving habitat for future generations. Conservationists study the tides, the shoreline erosion, and the delicate balance between human visitation and natural preservation, walking a careful line between sharing the island's stories and protecting its life. For visitors who come to Alcatraz today, it is often the sensory experience that lingers longest. As they step off the ferry, they feel the shift, the coolness of the air, the sharp scent of salt, the cry of gulls circling overhead. Walking the paths, they brush past blooming nasturtiums, wild fennel, and heirloom roses, their leaves trembling softly in the wind. Small bees hover among the blossoms, their low hum blending with the distant sound of waves striking the shore. Even within the old prison buildings, nature leaves its mark. Lichen patterns trace delicate shapes on the walls. Moss gathers in the cracks of windowsills. The sound of dripping water echoes faintly through long-abandoned corridors, a reminder that time and nature move forward, always, even in the stillest of places. One of the most remarkable projects on Alcatraz has been the careful restoration of the historic gardens. During the prison's operating years, inmates and staff tended these spaces, carving out moments of beauty within the confines of stone and concrete. Today, those gardens have been lovingly revived. Walking through them, you see brilliant fuchsia, lavender, and hardy succulents, all blooming with a quiet defiance, each petal and leaf a living bridge between past and present. For many visitors, the presence of birds is the most striking reminder that Alcatraz is more than just a monument. Standing at the island's edge, looking out across the vast waters, one can watch flocks of cormorants slicing through the air, their sleek forms glinting in the sun. You might see a gull rise suddenly into the wind, or hear the sharp, laughing call of a black oystercatcher along the rocky shoreline. These creatures know nothing of bars or history. They simply inhabit the island as they always have, faithful to the rhythms of tide, season, and sky. As evening settles, the island takes on a hushed, almost sacred quality. The buildings, worn and weathered, glow softly in the fading light. The gardens sway in the breeze. The birds nestle into their roosts, their feathers fluffed against the cool air. And all around, the sea sings its eternal song, wrapping the island in a lullaby older than memory. Standing here, in this place shaped by so many hands, you can feel the merging of past and present, the weight of history, softened by the persistence of life. Alcatraz, once a fortress of stone and steel, has become something gentler, something wilder. It is a place where stories and silences meet, where vines curl over rusted iron, and where the whisper of the wind carries both memory and renewal. Let us pause here, just for a moment longer, and feel the deep, quiet breath of the island, a breath that rises and falls with the sea, with the birds, with the soft, persistent bloom of nature reclaiming its space. The birds were among the first to return. Before Alcatraz was a prison, it was a sanctuary, not for people, but for winged creatures who found safety on its isolated cliffs. Brown pelicans once nested here in great numbers, so many that Spanish explorers named it La Isla de los Alcatrazes, the island of the pelicans. Though their nesting habits shifted over time, other species arrived and stayed. Western gulls are now the island's most visible residents. In spring, they return by the thousands to nest and raise their young. Their white feathers catch the morning light as they wheel above the ruins. On the ground, tufts of grass cradle their speckled eggs. The air fills with their calls, urgent but natural, reminders of a world that was always here, even when walls rose high. Snowy egrets, elegant and bright, find roosting spots among the decaying eaves and rafters. Their movements are graceful, as though honoring the stillness of the place they inhabit. On some evenings, you might glimpse black-crowned night herons standing motionless near a crumbled foundation, patient and regal, like quiet sentinels. And then there are the cormorants, black, slick-feathered, and endlessly watchful. They perch along railings and beams, their wings outstretched to dry. Like the prison's former occupants, they too keep their own rhythms, their own silent codes. But it's not only the birds who have returned. In every forgotten corner, something is blooming. The prison's once orderly gardens, originally tended by both guards and inmates, have been rediscovered and revived. Volunteers and naturalists now gently care for these spaces, planting heirloom roses, fuchsia, and succulents, many of which trace their lineage back to the early 1900s. Imagine a patch of brilliant pink blooms beneath a rusted window. Picture ivy curling through the slats of a stair rail. Along the old parade ground, wild grasses sway in time with the breeze, painting the ground in golds and greens. Native plants, once crowded out by infrastructure, have been reintroduced. Coastal bush lupine, sticky monkey flower, seaside daisy, all now flourish on the windswept slopes of the island. With them come bees, butterflies, and the soft hum of pollination, echoing like a low, contented lullaby across the empty yards. Today, if you were to walk the paths of Alcatraz, you might first notice the sound, or rather, the lack of it. The clang of cell doors is long gone. In its place is a silence that feels deliberate, almost sacred. Footsteps fall gently now, softened by moss or carried by the ocean wind. Tourists move quietly, pausing often. Some come for the stories, the legends of infamous escapes or notorious prisoners. But many leave touched more deeply by the place's quiet resilience, its soft strength, its wildness blooming in forgotten places. Park rangers and conservationists tread carefully, their work part history, part healing. They balance restoration with preservation, allowing nature to reclaim space while protecting the scars that speak of the island's layered past. Decay here is not something to erase, it is honored. It is part of the rhythm. Alcatraz is no longer only a symbol of confinement. It has become a sanctuary, a place where the past breathes and the present flourishes. School children plant seeds in the gardens once worked by inmates. Researchers study the habits of nesting birds and the health of local ecosystems. Artists come seeking inspiration, sketching the interplay of stone and vine, shadow and light. And through it all, the sea remains constant. The tide still laps at the rocky shore. The fog still drapes itself over the island in thick ribbons. The horizon still stretches wide, as it always has, unchanged, but always changing. As the day ends, the island begins to glow in the low sun. The grasses shimmer. The air cools. The birds settle into their nests. And the old prison, once the site of despair, becomes a silhouette of peace. Imagine standing there, on the edge of the island, the city far in the distance, the water vast and gentle around you. You feel the island breathe, a deep, slow breath, and you, understand that Alcatraz is no longer just a place of walls. It is a place of wings, roots, and silence. Nature has reclaimed what was never truly lost, only paused. And in doing so, it has given Alcatraz a new voice, quiet but enduring. And now, as the final light fades beyond the horizon and the island settles once again into quiet, we return to where we began, floating gently on calm waters, the silhouette of Alcatraz resting still against the sky. The journey has carried us through centuries of transformation, from rocky outcrop to military stronghold, from federal prison to a sanctuary of seabirds and blooms. Let your breath soften now. Let the sounds and stories drift like mist behind you. We've walked softly through the echoing cell blocks, past stories of solitude and change, through mysteries unsolved and memories that linger like faded ink on weathered stone. Alcatraz holds a history that is deep and textured, but it also holds something quieter, something slower. It holds the power of stillness, of waiting, of returning. What was once feared has become a place of reflection. What once held prisoners now shelters wings and wind and vines. As you rest here with me in this final moment, picture again the fog rolling in, wrapping the island in gentle gray. The sea hushes at the shore, and the call of a single gull rings out, not sharp, but soft, carried far on the breeze. The buildings stand, not abandoned, but listening, their walls holding space for memory and for healing. Perhaps you hear the distant echo of a banjo, a soft, uncertain tune drifting from the past. Perhaps you see the flash of white feathers as an egret lifts into the sky. Perhaps you feel the quiet strength of the stone beneath the vines. The island, like so many things, has changed. But in that change, it has found something new, not erasure, but renewal. The stories remain, softened now by the hands of time and the hush of sea wind. Take a moment to feel your own breath now, slow and steady. Let your shoulders grow heavy, your eyelids soft. You are safe here. You are wrapped in the stillness that only stories and water and time can bring. And if sleep is near, let it come like a tide, gentle and sure. Let your thoughts loosen, like the ropes of the last ferry drifting quietly from the dock. Let go of the noise of the day, and float now in the soft waters of this story, where nothing is rushed and nothing is forced. Just waves, just time, just peace. Thank you for joining me on tonight's journey. I hope it brought you a little peace, a little wonder, and a little closer to rest. Until next time, sweet dreams.